Hey everyone, Gill Gross here, Wimbledon 2024, day 4 in the books, and I am ready to go over it. Of course, it's not too late if you haven't already checked out my thoughts on the day 3 results. I was originally not planning on doing a show for both. I was going to combine the two, but so much happened yesterday that I felt it would have been too long a show, and I'm really glad I did it this way. So here I am again. Lots went down on this Thursday as well. We're going to talk about the Andy Murray send-off. We're going to talk about Arthur Fils beating Hubert Hurkacz, Novak Djokovic beating Jacob Fearnley in 4. We'll talk about Cam Norrie beating Jack Draper in 3. We will discuss Emil Ruusuvuori taking out Stefanos Tsitsipas in 4 sets. And very quickly at the end, it'll be Ben Shelton beating Lloyd Harris in 5. The other thing I'm really excited to talk about is the Taylor Fritz, Arthur Rinderknech drama, the spiciness, because I will never pass up an opportunity to weigh in on a little bit of beef. So we're definitely going to do that as well. Happy 4th of July to all of the American viewers and listeners, and to the British viewers and listeners as well. Speaking of British, Andy Murray certainly on the mind. That was last on center court, mixed doubles with Jamie. They end up losing in the first round, and All England Club did do a very nice ceremony for Andy at the end. So certainly emotional, very emotional, thinking about his career. I have so much admiration, absolutely awestruck by Andy. First of all, the whole Wimbledon connection is so exceptionally special, and you don't need to be British to understand the amount of joy he brought to that tennis nation, and to be struck by that and moved by that. And it will never get old watching Andy Murray win Wimbledon for the first time. That moment, it's one of the great tennis moments that I have had the pleasure to witness in my life. And I think I will always regard it in that pantheon. And I know I've said this before, but the monumental pressure on his shoulders to do it made it so hard. And man, I think it is one of the greatest displays in tennis history of withstanding a cauldron of pressure. Ceremony was nice. The video is pure gold. By far, the video is the best part of it. And then they bring Sue Barker out for an interview. That was an interesting way to do it. Generally not a fan of an interview in these kinds of moments. It's usually better to just give the player the mic and let them say what they want to say. And I find usually when you allow that to happen, it's more from the heart. It's more emotional. It's more genuine. It doesn't include this kind of other factor, which in this case is the interviewer. But in this case, the interviewer was, I think, part of the whole thing. And I don't get Sue Barker because I've never consumed the BBC. I've never watched the BBC when it comes to Wimbledon. Maybe I have when I spent that one summer in Wimbledon. But no, even then I won't get into it, but I barely watched BBC that summer. So Sue Barker means nothing to me. I know she means a lot, and she is synonymous with Wimbledon for anyone who grew up watching Wimbledon in the UK. So I don't really know or understand the significance of her coming out in that moment and conducting the interview, but I imagine there was some meaning there. And I enjoyed it somewhat. It was long. I'm glad that it was long and thorough, but I'm not sure I really needed the oral history of his career in that particular moment. I much preferred the end of the interview where Sue asked him about his family and his team and what's coming next and all of that. And I thought what was really good about the interview format is we got a nice bow tie on all of the major things that Andy would have probably wanted to hit on had he been given the mic to give a speech, although inevitably he would have forgotten to mention some of these things. There was also, a la Roger Federer Laver Cup, there were rivals on the court, or rivals and contemporaries and legends of the sport on court to share the moment with Andy. But I was kind of distracted by who was there and who wasn't. So first of all, I hear Roger Federer is in Wimbledon. I hear that. Mirka was seen watching a match on center court. Certainly Mirka did not come to Wimbledon without Roger. So I'm thinking, first of all, where's Roger? But I'm thinking that especially because Sue Barker in the interview says Roger is here, but Roger is not here. She also said Nadal was there. Nadal was not there, at least not on camera. So that part was kind of head scratching. And then you do see the people who are on the court. McEnroe, Navratilova, Djokovic, Swiatek, Rune, Draper, Norrie, Tim Henman. It's just, there's some randomness in the mix. Now, McEnroe and Navratilova and Djokovic and Henman, those four make a ton of sense, and Swiatek is world number one, and Draper is British, and Norrie is British. Holger, I don't know what to tell you. I can't really think of why he was there, but great for him. Definitely a cool experience, and I'm, again, like, great for Holger. Didn't bother me. It just was a little bit distracting to me that it felt like such a, I don't know, kind of a random bunch. You also have the awkwardness of Andy coming back on to play the mixed doubles with Emma Raducanu. So it's a little bit Australian Open 2019 like, where we say bye, Andy, and then Andy is back. So I wouldn't say it was like meticulously executed, but it was still it was a tremendous send-off nonetheless. Obviously, the crowd was terrific. The fact that they gave Murray kind of the champion's treatment of going through the clubhouse and coming onto the bridge and acknowledging the fans down on the grounds, which is, of course, that brilliant Wimbledon tradition. And for them to have Andy do that was great. So look, I thought it was really heartwarming, and I'm just so glad that Andy was healthy enough to get that moment, because I do think he will look back, remember it fondly. I think his fans will look back and remember it fondly. The video, again, was terrific, and I think that will be something that I might go back to from time to time, that Andy will probably go back to from time to time. So I think I've said everything I wanted to say about that. And with that, we can get into some match analysis. Just a disclaimer, I can't be as complete and as thorough as I usually like to be on these matches. I think everybody understands that at this point, but I still like to say it because sometimes I feel like I'm not getting the full picture of the match, and that's because I'm not. So I'm trying to pull big picture takeaways. I'm trying to pull whatever interesting tidbits that I can in these matches, but sometimes it's not the complete picture of everything that went down. So let's start with Djokovic Fearnley here. First time I've ever seen Jacob Fearnley play. So I just want to start with my thoughts on his game and what I made of the 22-year-old from Great Britain who played college tennis at TCU for, I want to say 3 or 4 years. I forget which one it is, but he wasn't like a one-and-done guy. He spent a lot of time in college, so he's coming onto tour a little bit late. The thing that stood out was the mental maturity, which sometimes I find players coming from NCAA tennis and just seemingly being very mature and handling pressure extraordinarily well. Certainly the handling pressure part was very evident with Ben Shelton as soon as he came onto the tour. And for Fearnley, there were no nerve issues. Not once did I feel like he got super tight. Even in the end, when you might think he got sloppy, I don't think he got tight. I just think he was playing high-risk tennis, and when you play high-risk tennis, you might miss some balls or double fault sometimes. That's what I think happened. I don't think he ever got tight. And that kind of brings me to the second thing about Fearnley's mental game that was excellent to me, and that's the tactical adjustments that he made. Rarely do you see such range, such elasticity. Fearnley came out in the first set, and I had one impression of how he likes to play, and he quickly turned that impression that I initially had. He turned it on its head, because by the third set and the fourth set, he was playing nothing like first set Jacob Fearnley. He got far more aggressive in the second half of the match. He started very solid, never overplaying, very high percentage decision-making from the baseline, high margin, not making a lot of errors. Then by the end, it was kind of run and gun. Let's hit the second serve really big. Let's hit the forehand as big as I possibly can. Let's come forward as much as possible. It was like a different guy, different player. So that's impressive to me. I love to see someone who, first of all, has options, different plans, different things they can try, and some flexibility in their game. That was good to see. Now, shot to shot, the backhand, very solid, very flat. It stays low. It's compact. It's great for soaking up pace. It's great for redirecting the ball. And I didn't think that Djokovic was able to make much progress in the backhand and backhand exchange, to be honest, which says a lot about Fearnley and that two-hander. The serving was big. I don't think he's a mega server, but he could certainly do some damage with the serve, and did. Thought he served very well in the match. He's a mobile player. I don't think he displayed any mind-blowing athleticism, but he can scramble. He can defend a little bit. All that is positive. My concern for Fearnley long-term would be the forehand, because to me it looked a little bit awkward. Western grip, racket tip kind of points forward, like towards the other side of the net on the preparation, which I think is a pretty strange, unconventional way to prepare for a forehand. Like usually on the unit turn, like your racket tip faces up, like at the ceiling, at the sky rather, if you're not indoors. But Fearnley is kind of pointed at his opponent. And then the take back is very, very low. It's a much lower take back than what you normally see. I'm one to talk. My take back is low as well. But these things are not really typical for the best forehands if you put them together. Now, I'm a results-based guy, right? I do not care what your technique looks like. I'm mostly looking at what a shot produces, especially because, technically speaking, I'm no wizard when it comes to my ability to recognize the nuances and to diagnose the nuances of technique. I rely on other people to do that for the most part. But I could recognize that the forehand had some quirkiness to it. And I thought it was the erratic side. There were some bad misses. And I also think it's a little bit limited what he's able to do on the run, what he's able to produce on the run. And he was not at a loss for power when he got his feet set and he was able to kind of load up the shot. But when he was on the move, and I think it has to do with his preparation, not giving him all that much power potential, that was a limiting factor. Plus the Western grip. Just look at the best forehands nowadays. Like, you don't see a lot of Western grips. That's the truth of it. I don't want to say, okay, Western grip, that's always horrible. It's not. But I do try to look at patterns, and I do try to collect the forehands that work and try to look at the themes. And one of the themes is the grips are not as extreme as the grip that Fearnley plays with, generally speaking. So the forehand is the shot I'm scrutinizing for Fearnley, ultimately. Now, 4-set match, Fearnley was competitive in every single set, so it was a great showing for the 22-year-old. As for Novak, I would say if you kind of split up his game into two categories, serve and ground strokes, In sets 1 and 2, I thought both were there. I'm not saying it was perfect, but I think both were there. In set 3, which Jacob Fearnley won, I don't think either was there. And then in set 4, I felt the serve was there. The ground strokes still kind of weren't, but Novak was gritty in the end, dialed up the defense, and Fearnley at 5-all in the second made some mistakes. He hit a couple of double faults, which you were kind of waiting for because he was going so big on the second serve that it was, when is he going to double fault? At some point, that's going to happen. Happened at 5-all twice in that game. But yeah, towards the end of the match, Novak didn't have his ground stroke mojo. And the positioning and the balance in the wind, that was the issue. We've talked about this before. I think particularly this year, every time it's been windy, I haven't really loved what I've seen from Novak. It just throws off his confidence because when he's not balanced and in position, he shells up and he stops hitting the ball with conviction, I find. Because obviously he doesn't want to miss a lot. He usually doesn't miss a lot. That's great. But in this case, I thought he hit too many bad trades. He hit too many attackable trades. And when I say trade, I mean neutral ball. So when the point is in neutral, you want to keep it in neutral. You want to hit a good enough ball so that you don't get attacked. That's where I thought Novak, particularly in the third set, he wasn't doing a good enough job of that. He was kind of leaving the ball too central, and Fearnley was taking massive cuts, and usually he was getting the job done with his big forehand and with his net rushing behind those big forehands from the middle of the court. Movement-wise, I thought Djokovic was competent, but I don't know that he's fast right now. So he doesn't look limited. He doesn't look stilted. He doesn't look awkward when he's moving around the court. I just don't think he looks super quick. Now, that might need to change if he wants to beat the top-tier competition at the end of the tournament. And all in all, he probably needs to play a little bit better in the full picture when it comes to his level compared to what he showed here against Fearnley. The good news is that the first serve when he made it, massive purchase, +1, same thing. He was kind of on top of things when he landed his first serve, other than the third set where his serve completely went away. And that kind of kept him going through the match. And that's what happens with Djokovic on grass. He's going to be able to fall back on his serve when the ground game isn't fully on point. And when the ground game isn't fully on point, it doesn't mean he's never going to break, because as we saw later in the fourth set, even when the offense isn't flowing off the ground, he can still play tough, play gritty, consistent, defend, put balls in the court, and try to just figure out a way. Right? So that's all I got on Djokovic Fearnley. Let's go to Hurkacz Fils. I didn't think this was going to be a good matchup for Arthur because Fils can struggle on his return of serve. And I thought, okay, Hurkacz is going to come out and probably have a lot of success with his serve. Wrong about that. Biggest win of Arthur Fils' career at a major. Deepest run at a major. What went down? Before I talk about Fils, ultimately, I do think you got to start here. It was a bad serving day for Hurkacz. Hurkacz's ace rate in this match was 9%. What is that? What does that mean? I know that sounds like it's not a number, but I intentionally don't use ace totals because this is a 4-set match, and what are we going to do? Compare it to Halle, where he's playing best of 3 and often winning in straight, so that's why we put it into a rate. So ace rate for Hurkacz, 9% in this match. What was it when he made the Halle final? I'll give you just match by match. It was 28, 29, 14, 24, 15. Those were the percentages. In this match, it was 9%. So Hurkacz, 9% ace rate on a grass court. Yikes, that's not what he needs to be bringing to the table. Aces aren't always the end-all, be-all, but at least it's an objective stat that we can look at to try to gauge where the serve potency was at. We can zoom in and look at some examples. I mean, first set tiebreak, I have a first serve where not only did he miss his spot on a tee serve on the ad side, but it was only 117 miles per hour. So you missed your spot and it was only 117. Yeah, Feast returned it with interest, won the baseline rally. What happened on the next point? Missed first serve. Feast wins the second serve point. Now Hurkacz in this first set tiebreak is down 2 mini breaks early. What happened in the second set? Hurkacz served 47%. First serves in. That's kind of a non-starter for a guy in Hurkacz who just needs that to be the hallmark of his game against an Arthur Feast who is absolutely on point off the ground today. Forehand and backhand. He hits way bigger than Hurkacz from the back of the court. Way bigger. Not just in this match, always. He's just a bigger hitter. I know that's weird because Hurkacz is the 6'6" guy who hits his serve 130 in his sleep, but it's just not the same thing off the ground. And it's always going to be Feast. He's faster. He hits bigger. He wasn't missing today. What else do I need to say? So Feast goes up 2-0. Hurkacz wins the third set. Hurkacz serves for the fourth set and misses a routine backhand pass at deuce. Then he hits a horrific-looking +1 forehand on ad out to be broken. Fourth set goes to a tiebreak. Hurkacz made some backhand unforced errors to go down in the tiebreak. He ends up facing a set point against at 6-7, hits a perfect wide serve. It ends up being a service winner. 7-all. This was kind of the point of the match. Hurkacz hits this horrendous drop shot that is a pretty easy forehand pass for Feast. Hits it with a slice grip, thinks he can just kind of shovel it past Hurkacz. And it looks like he can and will, but Hubie lays out and hits a diving volley, which goes in the court. Trouble is, it's not a finishing volley. Feast has a kind of a forehand slice that he tries to kind of push or dink and somehow misses it. Hurkacz is on the court. He's lying on the court, and Feast misses the shot somehow. And at this point, you're thinking, holy moly, that was the moment where Feast just missed a passing shot where Hurkacz is on his ass is on the court, and Feast missed a passing shot. That's probably the decisive moment in this match. And it was the decisive moment in the match, but not how we thought it would be, because Hurkacz stays down on the court, hurt very badly, needs he can't even walk right when he gets up. But he's got set point in his favor. It looks like the kind of injury where maybe you retire right away. But Hurkacz doesn't do that. He gets his knee wrapped by the doctor. And he plays this point at 7-8 where he mishits a return, but ends up mishitting it in a good way that made it pretty difficult for Feast. Sneaks in on a volley, but he couldn't really close in on the net. Hits the volley from no man's land, and Feast ends up making the forehand pass cross court, where Hurkacz dives for it again. He just hurt his knee, diving to his right on a volley, and on the next point, after getting his knee mummified, Hurkacz dove again. And then at 8-all, Feast hits a backhand cross-court winner where he got Hurkacz moving a little bit, and Hurkacz just couldn't really move with any effectiveness, and it was a pretty easy open court for a backhand winner by Feast. And then Hubie retires with Feast having a match point. He was holding his second match point. And sorry, I said set point earlier on in the analysis, I now realize, but of course it was a match point. And Hubie retires on this match point. So, a couple things. First of all, real quick, I don't want to make a big deal out of this because it's not, but, Hurkacz just played. The injury was bad enough where if Hurkacz retired immediately, nobody would have blamed him. I would not have batted an eye if Hurkacz just retired immediately. Of course, he didn't want to do it because he was upset point So he gave it a go. But he literally laid out for a dive on the next point, then played another point. You're telling me you can't just throw the match point and give Arthur his moment? I'm not saying, like, it was actually giving me anxiety watching Hurkacz limp around during these points. So I'm not saying that Hurkacz was okay in any way and his knee might be badly injured, but you just played 2 points. You can't play. You played 2 points and you actually kind of tried in them. You gave effort. So you can't just throw a point and give Arthur his moment. I didn't really approve of the retirement. I think you play that point. Sorry. I know it's weird to say because at the end of the day, this is also a sympathetic moment for Hurkacz, and I feel genuinely bad for him. So it's weird to criticize him, but that's how I feel about the retirement. It's unfortunate overall because Hurkacz could have won the match. He was right in it. And, he would have had a set point in the fourth. Who knows what would have happened in a fifth? Obviously, it was still up for grabs. Since 2022, Hurkacz, 8 wins in Paris, 4 wins at Wimbledon. Food for thought. He's been better on the clay than he has been on the grass, even though he's had a couple of great hollow runs. Overall, at majors, it's been good for Hurkacz this year so far. But this was, of course, a little bit of a setback. You can't give him a full pass. You can't say, oh, he got unlucky, he got hurt, because let's face it, he faced match point before he got hurt. He served for the 4th set. He had a chance to force a 5th. He went down 2 sets to love, right? None of that was because of the injury. So I think you do need to look at the result, and you don't know what would have happened if the knee injury didn't happen, but you do know that Hurkacz put himself in a very precarious position, and that Fils put himself in a position to win the match. So it's kind of an interesting result in the sense you don't really know exactly what the correct way is to internalize it. But however you look at it, that's a pretty big blow for a guy who came into Wimbledon with immense expectations by most. I had Alex de Minaur beating him in the 4th round. And Alex seems to be the only guy who's taking care of business quietly at Wimbledon so far, because everyone is going 5 sets, or at least 4. Like, nobody is having quick matches except de Minaur. I'm exaggerating, but it does feel like among the favorites, he's the guy who has just kind of cruised his way through into the 3rd round. Okay, let's do some drama. Let's take a break from the matches. Let's do some drama, shall we? Arthur Rinderknech, before facing Taylor Fritz, said, and I quote, "The atmosphere will be calmer than at Roland Garros 2023, and he will cry a little less. He was a little whiny. I have nothing against him, but if he expected the French public to give him kisses between points, it was a bad time." All right, that's what Rinderknech said. Let's start here. That is a load of crap, because my recollection is that Taylor Fritz didn't whine one bit. He didn't whine at all. He never went to the umpire to say, hey, can you get the crowd under control, or the fans are bothering me, or anything. He never went to the umpire. He never went at the crowd directly, at least never at a point where the TV cameras picked it up. He didn't complain to the media after the match about the crowd. All he did was, after winning the match, after winning match point, he gave him the silencer. He put his finger to his mouth and gave the little shh. That's what I call putting your head down, letting your racket do the talking, and then celebrating. Celebrating. Not whining, celebrating. That's what Taylor Fritz did. But Arthur Rinderknech basically called him a whiner and a crybaby. So Fritz beats Rinderknech in 4 sets today. And when they go to the net, initially, I'll tell you, all I heard was Taylor say, "You know what you did." And then Arthur says, "I know what I did." And Taylor, not even looking at him, packing up his bag, says, "You know what you did." So that's all. But there was clearly an argument at the net. And it was very obvious what it was about. At least to me it was. Apparently to Arthur it wasn't. So here's what Taylor said after the match. He said, "As soon as I saw it, the match was..." Wait. Okay, got it. Taylor said, "As soon as I saw it, the match was basically over. I'm a very chill person. I don't do anything that could rub people the wrong way. So when someone just kind of goes out of their way to take a shot at me, then I'm just going to take it. It gave me the extra fire to win. When we shook hands, I just said, 'Have a nice flight home.' He asked me what. I told him, he asked me what I said. I told him what I said. He told me that he was in double still. I said, 'Oh, congrats, good for you.' Then he started acting like, 'Why are you blah, 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 blah?' I'm like, 'Dude, you know what you said. You know what you said. Don't disrespect me before the match and then expect me to be all nice after the match. That's not how it works.'" I don't know how much I can add other than I agree with what Taylor says at the end here. Don't disrespect me before the match and then expect me to be all nice after the match. That's not how it works. Yeah. Like Arthur knows what he said. I agree with everything Taylor has said. I think Rinderknech knew exactly what this was about, and playing dumb, pretending to be dumb, like I have even less respect for that. I would have respect for either kind of standing on your business and being like, yeah, you were kind of whiny. If that's what Rinderknech believes, if that's his recollection, which directly goes against how I remember the way Taylor Fritz handled himself and conducted himself throughout that match, but whatever. If that's Rinderknech's recollection, then stand on what you said. And if you don't want to stand on what you said, then say, "Hey man, sorry for what I said." But to pretend like you don't know what's going on, to pretend like to play dumb is the weakest move possible. The weakest. So not only do I disagree with Rinderknech's initial comments about Taylor, but I also agree with how Taylor handled this whole thing. Not that, if he took the high ground, it wouldn't have been a viable option, but why take the high ground when you can use it as fuel and motivation? I'm pretty sure after he won match point, he turned to his team, he pointed at Rinderknech and he said, "F this guy." So you just know that the whole match, that's how he was feeling. And if you're like most athletes, that's going to make you play better. So Fritz is going to use that, and there is no reason for Taylor to play nice after the match, after what Rinderknech said. That's where I stand on the drama. Pretty much fully team Fritz, and won't apologize for it. I'm sure there will be some who feel that Taylor wasn't all that classy here, but I don't blame him for not being classy after what Arthur said. All right. Draper versus Norrie. Insane intensity from Cam Norrie is what I expected, and that is exactly what we got. He played with a chip on his shoulder. He fought like an animal, and he played the best tennis I've seen him play in a long, long, long time. He's pretty good at the Australian Open this year, but this might have been even another level. He was not playing around. So I don't think you can discount the mental dynamics of that. We saw on the women's side, funny enough, we saw Harriet Dart, British number 2, beat Katie Bolter, British number 1. No, I don't think that's an apples to apples comparison because Harriet Dart wasn't holding the mantle as the British number 1 for a couple of years. She didn't have that taken from her. But even though Cam and Jack, they're friendly off the court by all accounts, when someone takes something from you that was yours, you owned it, how does that not get you going? How do you not come out and try to get that thing back? I mean, come on, this is chip on the shoulder psychology 101, and I think that's where you have to start when it comes to this match and this result, because Jack had the pressure and he had the title that he was trying to now defend for the very first time, and Norrie was there to take back what used to be his. Now, he's not going to be British number one for winning, but it's going to feel in that moment like he took it back, and rightly so. When I made this the popcorn match in my preview, I talked about the lefty on lefty part of it and how I was interested to see how the points played out from a pattern standpoint. And the big thing that did end up standing out is that Draper on his cross-court backhand didn't get what he usually gets out of Cam Norrie. Jack's got a great cross-court backhand. It stays low. It comes hard. He achieves width on it very seamlessly and easily. And what he ends up doing is he goes hard into these righty forehands, hard and low, and he gets them to kind of lift up on the ball. It's a heavier topspin shot, the righty forehand. So if it isn't struck with conviction, if it lands short, it becomes a ball that sits up for Jack to attack. Norrie's backhand is the opposite of that. It stays so low on the grass. It is so difficult to attack. He somehow hits it with like zero net clearance and doesn't miss it all that much. And it is maybe the flattest shot on the entire ATP Tour. So Draper, backhand to backhand, wasn't getting anywhere. And I thought he was actually getting the worst of those exchanges. He was usually coming out as the player whose contact point was first to be disrupted in some way, the first to surrender a weak ball in some way. And that was very different than what Jack normally experiences against a righty opponent. Also, while we're on the topic of Norrie's backhand, Cam was finding passing shots off of that wing over and over and over again, to the point where it was almost like Draper was in such disbelief about how consistently excellent the passing shots were on Norrie's backhand. They just couldn't stop testing it. He couldn't stop trying it. And it was like, all right, this time you're not going to rip a perfect down the line pass. Oh, it happens again. Okay, but this time, seriously, this cannot last. This cannot continue to be happening to me. And it kept happening. There was one game where 3 points in a row, Draper ended up hitting volleys from his shoelaces on approach shots to Norrie's backhand. And he won one of the points, but it was like, really? 3 in a row? Sometimes flatter shots actually can sit up more for volleys, for volleyers. Norrie is so good at controlling the trajectory of his backhand that he's able to get the ball to dip without topspin somehow. It's insane. But his ability to find passing shots off of that wing was key. Norrie was also using his backhand on the +1 effectively, and the threat of his backhand on the +1 effectively, because on the ad side, he was standing basically on the singles line. It's a play that I've seen Draper implement quite a bit, actually. I've never seen it from Norrie, but it's kind of on brand for Cam because he's always looking for weird and interesting tactics to play. And it makes a lot of sense for Norrie because of how low and sharply angled his backhand can be sometimes, because you open up the angle to be even sharper on the wide serve. And it doesn't make sense. This tactic doesn't make sense if you are a player who wants a +1 forehand. But if you're Norrie and you actually like your backhand, particularly on this surface, you're going to end up getting that +1 backhand because basically wherever the ball goes on the court, it's going to be on your backhand because of where he's standing. And he's able to hit the wide serve and then hit the backhand sharply angled and precise into the open court. And obviously, if Draper, and I saw him do this once, if Draper hits the big redirect forehand down the line return, then too good. Too good. But more often than not, that wasn't happening. And that return, that serve position, I should say, was effective for Norrie. There's also the physical side. Seemed like Cam was holding up better. Rally tolerance was better. And Norrie can kind of have this Agassi thing going on sometimes where he's dictating without finishing. and it just sucks it out of your legs. He makes it so physical because he's not necessarily always, especially from the baseline, he's not always looking to land a finishing blow. He is happy to make you move and move and move and just try to keep hold of the point without putting you out of your misery. That happened quite a bit. Took a little bit out of Jack's legs. So the other thing, return of serve absolutely took over when Draper served for it at 5-4 in the third. And ultimately, it didn't feel, all match long, it didn't feel like Draper's serve was enough of a weapon for him. And that was a major example where Norrie was able to plaster a lot of deep returns in that game. So third set ends up going to a tiebreak. Tiebreak was horrid from both players. Just a terrible, wretched tiebreak. But ultimately, Draper a little bit stronger. Norrie a little bit stronger in the end. And I hope that I will go a long time without having to analyze a match between these two again, apparently, because I can't differentiate the two when it comes to saying the correct person's name. Couple more here. Two more. Ruusuvuori Tsitsipas first. Ruusuvuori had the big January, and I'm shocked at how bad it's been since then, because he had the Hong Kong run, and then I think he made the final in Hong Kong, and then he went up 2-0 against Emil Medvedev, and that was a really excellent showing from Emil, and I thought he was going to build off of that. Always been a promising young player. Now he's kind of at the start of his prime, and he hasn't progressed quite as much as I thought that he might. But he has always been a very talented ball striker. When he gets a hold of the ball off the ground, it is nuclear off of both wings, and that goes a long way against Tsitsipas, who's not always a great pace absorber in quicker conditions. I didn't watch a ton of this one, and there was a sequence to me at 2-3 in the fourth set, Ruusuvuori up 2-1. I thought this sequence was very, very telling. It was 15-all. Tsitsipas got jammed on back-to-back runaround forehands. What do I mean when I say Tsitsipas got jammed? I mean he was trying to move around the ball, and he didn't quite get there. He was moving to his left. He was trying to turn a backhand into a forehand, and instead he had a forehand, but there wasn't enough space between the ball and his body, and he wasn't able to really get the extension that he wants on his forehand. And he missed back-to-back. And then on the third point of this sequence at 15-40, Ruusuvuori hammered a backhand cross-court, pretty deep, but it didn't have any width. It was right at the Tsitsipas backhand. But Steph was beaten for pace. Sometimes that's all it takes against Tsitsipas. Just hit the ball hard, and you might be able to force an error that way. And that helps Ruusuvuori. But what happened there? The speed of the court not only helped Emil and hurt Tsitsipas on that last point, but it certainly factored in on those two jammed runaround forehands. And once again, and I know I might have hit on this a little bit on the mailbag at the start of the week, but I want to hammer it home. I think it is huge. The runaround forehand factor is enormous on grass. If you're a player who relies on turning backhands into forehands with your runaround footwork on a consistent basis, if you need to do that to be successful, the grass puts you at a disadvantage. Because the court surface is quicker, because the ball doesn't lose as much speed through the bounce, and in some cases, sometimes because you can't move quite as explosively, it is harder to find your runarounds. So you have to be okay with hitting backhands sometimes. It has to be okay. If you're a player like Federer or Berrettini, yes, you want to run around your backhand and hit forehands when you can, but you also have a system in place, excellent slice backhands in this case, where it's all right if you can't find your forehand. Therefore, you can be a little bit more selective about when you run around, and you can avoid those jam shots. You can avoid getting yourself out of position for no reason. So once again, we see that the serve, forehand, volleys, offensive cocktail that Tsitsipas brings to the table, which is as good, if not better, than anybody else's combination of serve, forehand, volleys. It does not make Tsitsipas a grass threat. It does not make up for the return, the backhand return, the backhand defense stuff. Doesn't quite do it. I'm old enough to remember when people thought that Tsitsipas was going to be a really, really great grass court player. Didn't really get on that train, luckily. I was on the right side of that, but I was certain that it was because of Roger Federer. People thought that Tsitsipas played like Federer, and then they thought, okay, he's going to have a great grass career. And it just didn't, it hasn't played out like that. Why? Here's what I want to, this is my final parting words. Why isn't Tsitsipas great on the grass? Don't just fixate on the backhand return. There is more to it. The forehand backhand runaround dynamic is enormous. It's absolutely huge because of the massive delta that exists between his forehand and his backhand. Sometimes he's missing forehands because he's insecure about his backhand, and sometimes he's hitting backhands when he, on other surfaces, would be hitting forehands. And you just can't understate how big that is. Let's end on Shelton Harris. There's really only one thing I want to say about this. It's going to be quick. 5th set tiebreak, 10-point tiebreak. Shelton was way braver than Lloyd Harris. And that doesn't always mean you're going to win the match. Doesn't always mean it's going to be a great thing if you're braver. But Shelton didn't make erratic errors, didn't shoot himself in the foot at any point. But he was the one who was backing himself to go after his forehand. He missed maybe one, but he made a whole lot more. Shelton was fearless on his forehand. And many times in the tiebreak, he would come forward onto Harris's backhand side, even without a huge advantage. It was gutsy. It was risky. I'm not talking about Shelton having an easy approach shot opportunity, hitting a great approach shot to Harris's backhand and coming in. That's not risky at all. That's just sound, high percentage textbook tennis. But what Shelton was doing was like, I'm not in a great position in this point, but I'm just going to force it to your backhand and force my way in. And if you pass me on your two-hander, which isn't the strongest shot for Lloyd, it's a little bit stiff, it's a little bit flat, but not in the good way. If you pass me on that backhand, too good. But I'm coming in. I'm going to your backhand, I'm coming in. So he was clear-headed, he was bold, he was making things happen. Lloyd Harris was much more reactive. And what I like about the way Ben went about the fearless tennis is that I didn't see any backhands down the line. I didn't see any drop shots from behind the baseline. I didn't see any big cuts on return of serve. These are the things that Shelton tries to attempt sometimes that I just find to be reckless and low percentage, and it goes the other way. But when he avoids these things and he's backing himself with things like net rushing at his opponent's weakness or trying to use his forehand as a weapon, that gets a thumbs up for me. And what Shelton did in a big spot here to win now back-to-back 5-setters at Wimbledon, it's why he's doing so well at these slams. It's because he comes out and he has a certain fearlessness that tends to serve him well. And that's how he was able to kind of win this match despite being out-aced, out-served, actually by a landslide. So it was a really good effort by Shelton in that final set tiebreak. I really liked what I saw. The plan is to make one show that will cover all of the third round matches right now. That's probably what's going to end up happening. So I will talk to you then. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.